I love that I get to come to work and I don't even feel like it's work.
Mm,
It's I feel guilty that I get a paycheck because I love what I do. I love, and part of that is the people that I'm around. Like they make coming so fun and enjoyable, and our teachers are knocking it out of the park. But find that environment that also feels like that for you. Like, man, I feel guilty that I'm getting a paycheck. And then if you can create that environment where people really want to be there, if you can make each person you come in contact with, if you can make them feel important,
mm,
valued, and appreciated, you give them a very powerful gift.
mm. We've all heard the story, or at least seen the movie of the Titanic. A big old ship sinks down and leaves us metaphor after metaphor floating in our minds. Metaphors for things like foresight, hubris, class division. Are we selfless like Jack, who sacrifices himself for others, or selfish like Rose, who I still contend had plenty of room left on that raft? Among the symbolism attached to the Titanic, I've long been more interested with the symbolism of the thing that attacked the boat, the iceberg. It wasn't the visible part of the iceberg that sank the ship. It was what was below, the collision course of the submerged ice with the side of the ship below the water. What's below the surface is what decides whether we float or sink. And this is an apt metaphor for school culture. So much of the culture clash and conflict that we have stems from the visible behaviors, but those visible behaviors stem from what's below the surface. And the more we learn about and investigate our school culture and what's driving below the surface, the more we make it visible. And this doesn't mean we don't deal with storms, but it does mean we prepare for them and weather them differently. Ignore your school culture and you may be en route to trouble. This week, we look below the surface at how school culture is shaped. Who has the greatest influence? What do we do when the culture turns cynical? And how can we dive deeper to stay afloat during the challenges of education? So whether you're looking at the culture of your classroom or your entire school, add another big old ice cube to that glass, pump some Celine Dion, because once more I'll open the door for another Educator Happy Hour. Educator Happy Hour is brought to you by Top Youth Speakers, the source for speakers and professional development leaders whose messages are evidence-based and life-changing. If you're looking for a way to rally your students or staff for the conclusion of the school year or gear them up at the start of next year, then head over to topyouthspeakers.com. Check out the lineup of amazingly talented speakers, browse their videos, see the testimonials, and create an event your staff and students will never forget. That's topyouthspeakers.com. What is up, Happy Hour Hodgepodge? I hope you all are springing into spring across the nation, across the world as you listen to this. I'm stepping into this week with my heart so full over the last week, having an amazing vacation time, spring break with the family, getting a great opportunity to connect with some amazing educators and keynote at ASCD 2023. And if you're feeling in a slump, I could not recommend more highly to check out a great educator conference. So often we get stuck in our silos, but once you get out and connect with other amazing educators who are passionate and caring and insightful, you get a whole renewed understanding and motivation to continue this great work. So whether it's a local conference or something more national, next time you're in that slump, look for great educators who care about this work, because I promise you, they exist all over the world. Now, if you listen to last week's episode, you'll realize that we don't have a statements update because we didn't have any statements last week. Our last episode was one of my favorites of just a collection of ridiculous educator stories. If you haven't given it a listen yet, give it a go, because just sharing and bonding over the absurd and hilarious and embarrassing moments of education is a great way to connect. And if nothing else, it's really entertaining. So with no update on that front, we're going to dive straight into our topic this week: school culture. School culture gets talked about a lot. There are endless writers, thinkers, and researchers studying it, as you'll no doubt hear some of on today's episode. But influencing it is another matter. How do you know what your culture truly is? How do you shape it to be a force for good, especially when it turns cynical or negative? Most of all, what mindsets and strategies work in real schools during today's educational climate? These are all at the heart of the conversation with my guest, Burke Davis. I first met Burke when he invited me to do some professional development with his staff, and before I even hopped on a plane to Idaho, I could tell he was someone who cared deeply about creating a caring culture. The welcoming, hardworking, and curious culture I experienced at Shelley High School was no accident. It was by design and dedication. So I knew Burke was a go-to school leader on how to influence the culture of a school or classroom. Burke Davis is the principal of Shelley High School in Idaho. He taught health and social studies classes for 9 years at Shelley before transitioning into administration. Burke finished his master's at APUS and his education specialist degree from NNU. He has been married to his wife, Stacy, for 19 years and is the father of 3 children, Brinley, Ashton, and Boston. Burke is finishing his 18th year in education and has been recognized as the Shelley High School Teacher of the Year, Sylvan Learning Center Teacher of the Year, Utah State Distinguished Mentor, IHSAA Girls Basketball Coach of the Year, and IASA Assistant Principal of the Year. He is a diehard Celtics, Raiders, Jayhawks, Huskies, and Red Sox fan and hopes to be a lifelong learner. Burke's personal mantra is to be a little better every day and to realize that every interaction matters, to be a depositor to help build people up and leave them better off than when he found them. So welcome our guest this week, Burke Davis. All right, Burke Davis, welcome to Educator Happy Hour. How you doing right now?
I'm doing well. We're just coming off a spring break, so a little rejuvenated, refreshed, ready to finish the year strong, and just honored and privileged to be on here with you.
Love it. So before we get into our typical standard question, the question I would love for you to just answer to our audience is, I want you to describe your school's mascot, because I am obsessed with your mascot. I talk about it all the time. I mean, I've been to a lot of schools. You know, I've seen the Red Hawks and the Trojans and the Tigers, but not very often does a school have a mascot of the russet potato. So could you just give us an image? What does your mascot look like?
Yeah, we love King Russet, the mascot, the one that they dress up and they go to games. His nickname is Boomer. And it's, somebody described it earlier as a muscular potato, the King Russet potato, and it's got a cape and a spear and a crown, and we are the Russets, and we have a lot of pride in it. We love it. We own it. We were just awarded or recognized as the #1 food mascot in the nation.
Love it.
And they put all of the winning categories together, and we ended up #2 overall in the entire nation. So we love the Russets. We own it, and it's a lot of fun.
It is amazing. I'm going to link a picture in the show notes because it's such
I was gonna say, if you haven't, you got to get on and check it out. It's very unique and worth checking out for sure.
Yeah, our mission is to make sure that you get the #1 next year overall category. We're gonna drive that voting for sure. All right. So our first question we actually ask all of our guests is, if you're having a stressful, challenging, or just overwhelming day, what is your drink or decompressor of choice?
Love it. And I want to get into that, if I could, just real quick, just because when I went into education 18 years ago, I've been a teacher, a coach, an administrator for 9 years. And when I started administration, I just thought I never want to miss an opportunity to thank educators. And you've talked a little bit about this in your podcast before, about the challenges and the difficulties and some of the hard times. And there's some good times too, but the difficulties there. And just to not miss an opportunity to thank those that are involved in education. And that's the wide span of superintendents to administrators, teachers, paras, bus drivers, and everybody in between. I'm just thanking you for what you're doing. You're in the trenches. You guys are doing a great job. And I just want to take just a few minutes, if I could, and thank those modern day miracles for everything that they're doing for our kids in our nation today. So I just want to get into that before I get into my drink of choice. And I've thought a lot about this, and it's obvious for those that know me, and it's Diet Pepsi.
All right.
But specifically, it's got to be in a can and about 34 to 38 degrees right before it starts to slush. You can do a fountain and the bottles are okay, like if you have to, but the cold Diet Pepsi is definitely my drink of choice. Just a funny quick story. I also work road construction, or I've done that off and on. Same thing, right? To supplement teacher income. You've talked a little bit about that recently, and I've done that for over 20 years. And every year, at least once or twice, I get randomly drug tested. And finally, after like the second or third time, one of my coworkers is like, I don't know why you're always testing him. All you're going to find in his blood is Diet Pepsi. Because I'll be honest, I drink way too much Diet Pepsi. I do start the morning with some water. But yeah, definitely a cold diet Pepsi in a can.
I love it. I love it. Do you have like a temperature control chamber to make sure that it is right at that perfectly 34-ish to 38 degrees?
Yeah, every fridge is different. So on the one that I have in my office, it's right over here. It's like 5. You set it to 5, and it's perfect. Like, and it's like you're saying at the end of the day. And I'll be honest, I drink too many throughout the day, but at the end of the day, you get that perfect diet Pepsi, and it just helps, man.
I love it. I feel like most educators I talk to, they're either in like the coffee camp or they're in like the
Yeah.
Diet Coke, Diet Pepsi sort of camp as like that's their caffeine fix. So I'm sure a lot of people can relate. But I'm so excited to get a chance to connect with you around this topic. We're gonna be talking about the idea of building culture and leading and strengthening a culture, especially in the 21st century. And it is all the conversation around right now is how do we get people bonded together and working together to do the hard work of education and to move the needle forward. And so my first question for you is if you could describe your ideal school or organizational culture in just 3 words, what would be the 3 words that you would choose?
That's a good question. Ultimately, love, serve, and care. Those are what come
Mm,
to my mind. Is ultimately you're going to have a school culture where everybody embodies that mantra of loving, serving, and caring for ourselves, for for each other, for our staff,
mm,
for our kiddos, and everybody encompasses and embodies that.
mm. What are some of the ways that you've seen that play out within your organization where you've had that moment where you're like, okay, yeah, we're getting it. We have or we're building the culture that we're looking for.
Yeah, that's a good question, and maybe I'll kind of do a little bit of background and talk about. There was a YouTube video and it had like 20 something million hits,
Mm.
maybe more by now, and it came out in the early 2000s. It's called The Battle of Kruger. Have you
Hmm.
ever by chance seen that?
No, I don't think so.
It's a video that takes place in Africa, and you have some tourists that are viewing this Waterloo of some water buffalo they're getting a drink, and off to the side you see these lions start to come in, and so they
Mm.
start almost broadcasting like a sports event. They have their color, their play by play as these lions are sneaking in. And all of a sudden, the lions attack, and they're filming this whole scene. You can still look it up on YouTube,
Mm.
and the lions, of course, finding the weakest water buffalo they can, they get the young one.
Mm.
They're starting to get after it, and it's kind of halfway in the water.
Mm.
And as they're kind of trying to take down this, it looks like a younger calf or water buffalo, all of a sudden, out of the water, a crocodile comes up and gets the leg of this water buffalo.
Whew.
And so they're kind of fighting back and forth, and these tourists are commenting. And what you don't see in the background is, I'm guessing, between like 200 and 300 water buffalo, and they start surrounding this Waterloo, and they start
Mm.
sneaking in. Eventually, the lions win and pull this calf away. And right about that time, all of these water buffalo sneak in and end up like horning, and ramming the lions and get it away. And it's like a miraculous thing. All of a
Mm.
sudden, that little baby water buffalo stands up and runs off with them.
Mm.
And there's a guy, Scott O'Neill. He wrote a book. He's an author of Be Great Where You Are,
Mm.
and he talks about this in his book, and then he describes the different events in these situation of this video. And
Mm.
he says basically there's 4 types of groups or people in this video. You have the tourists, and those are the people that are in our lives that sometimes just watch life go by. They're
Mm.
idle, they don't get out of their comfort zone, they're complainers, they want somebody else to fix their problems. You have the lions that have a big name, but they often prey on the weak. They
Mm.
sometimes forget where they come from, and they go at it alone. And then you have the crocodiles, who are the type of people that maybe kick people when they're down. They keep lists of everybody's mistakes to try and use that as leverage later. And then you have the water buffalo.
Mm.
And so to kind of go back when we're talking about culture, we have these types of people in our lives, and what we want to do, and in business and organizations and schools is everywhere, is we want to attract and get more water buffalo,
Mhm.
right? Those people that love, serve, and care. They lead a lot of different leaders. They lift people when they're down. They're lifelong learners, and they just support each other, right? That was that original question of like
Mm.
those strong characteristics of that's what loving and serving and caring is all about, is really being the water buffalo, and just supporting each other when those circumstances arise of taking advantage of that. And that's part of the challenge today. Is it seems to be like we have a lot more crocodiles, a lot more lions, and a lot more tourists out there than there ever has been.
Yeah.
And part of that is the platform that people have, right? Social media, surveys, which, we're talking on culture. And if I could just get in, one of the biggest mistakes that I think schools, businesses, all organizations do, and there's a purpose for some. I'm not saying get rid of them entirely, but get rid of anonymous surveys. It's one of the
Hmm.
biggest culture killers in our society.
Hmm.
If you think about an anonymous survey and you get those results, 99 out of 100 times, you're looking at that one negative comment.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to figure out who wrote it. You can't defend it. You cause frustration. And it's like, and I've never came across somebody who says, man, I'm better off because of that anonymous survey. Now, I think what we need to enforce is, right, it's communication.
Yeah.
And when you have an issue or a concern, let's talk about it. Let's look me in the eye. Let's get face to face and work through this.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes back to like Stephen Covey, right? When
Yeah.
when he talked about seek to understand first before being understood.
Mm-hmm.
Too many people in our society and in our cultures and our schools, we're just listening to reply
Yeah.
and not really understand of where they're coming from and what is that story, and let's work through this together. And so ultimately, get rid of just anonymous surveys. I'm going to stop there. I don't want to get on a tangent. We're limited on time, but ultimately, like, to build that culture, just work and on building those water buffaloes in your programs.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I love an extended metaphor, and my brain is just bursting right now. I'm like, oh my gosh, like we're gonna dive into talk about tourists. We're gonna talk about the crocodiles, and like even as you're describing it, I'm just picturing a teacher being caught between like the lions of politics, telling them what to do, and their actual
Yeah.
students in their classroom. So we're gonna dive into that. But since you brought up the idea around communication, I think that is a big piece, and I am a huge advocate of surveys. I think that we should have way more, like sports, they keep statistics on everything, and they're able to look at those data points, and they're able to make decisions. But that idea that the more we can make those as authentic as possible, as open as possible, and to allow people to be in that conversation together. And I think that's what's key about that idea of anonymity. People just spout out some thoughts, and then there's no real like accountability or follow-up conversation, which is often missing. And too often it has felt like surveys or culture inventories is just kind of like something to check off the box or the list of like, yep, we do a culture survey. But it's like, what are we doing with this? How is the leader demonstrating or following up a response to that survey or that communication? How are the staff or whoever else is involved? How are they getting a chance to also follow up on what they need? And that dialogue seems to be a really, really big piece of building culture. So let's go there. If you have more that you want to say around the idea of anonymity and open conversation, what are some of the other things that you think are critical as a part of that?
Couple thoughts as you were talking is we can always do better with communicating,
Yeah.
right? I think that's one of the things. There's probably not a school or a business that doesn't get some feedback that says we need better
Yeah,
communication.
true.
And so it needs to be a priority. But I also think people need to understand that it's a two-way street.
Mm-hmm.
That sometimes, when I've always said what's important gets done.
Hmm.
And if something's important to you, you can't just say, well, I didn't know, or nobody like follow up.
Mm.
And I've been trying to get a hold of, an example is I'm trying to change the date of a hotel. And I
Mhm.
tried for like 3 days to change this date for down the road, and I can't get a hold of anybody. I keep getting this dang automated service, leave a message, but I keep calling because it's important. I just keep after it. It's the persistence part of it. And so what's important gets done, but it's a two-way street of communication. And really it's about understanding how to ask the right questions so that we're
Mm.
better on that same page when we don't understand something, or when things are going on in schools, or things of, I love the phrase, hey, can you help me understand blank
Mm.
better, or
Mm.
can you help me understand why you decided or chose what you did? It's a very non-threatening way, but it comes across as, when we're better informed, there's a better chance of us being on the same page
Mhm.
and having that vision as we go forward.
Yeah, I love that. I think I've used the analogy often around school leaders in particular. They are, I think, the heart of a school, heart of an organization. I mean, they have so much influence on the culture and how the staff feel and how students feel. But I use this idea of like the heart is kind of a two-way thing. Not only does it pump out, but it also receives. It sends and it receives. And I think it's critical that a lot of school leaders and teachers and whoever is involved in this thing called education really evaluate both the sending of their communication and the receiving. To what extent am I working hard to communicate what I need and trying to really be clear and concise? And to what extent am I getting some feedback from my staff of, is that clarity being reached or not? How do I understand better what your experience is? And I think it's only if we have both the sending and the receiving on both those levels that people are really going to feel trusted and safe and a part of the community moving forward. And more than ever, I think that's critical to an organization. How do we get people to feel like they're a part of the table and a part of this community of learners, scholars, teachers, etc.?
I don't know if you follow George Kiros, one of my idols. His blogs are amazing. And he says something to the effect of anybody can win an argument or a debate in their own head. And that's kind of what I think you were just talking about a second ago is that anonymity or that dissonance. If we're not creating a culture that opens up the door to let's have these conversations, even if they're
Mm,
difficult and
mhm,
hard, let's still have those conversations because
mm,
that's how we're going to get progress. And it's like the 24 72-hour rule.
mm,
Never go 24 hours without thanking somebody and waiting 72 hours before you're going to complain.
mm,
Because oftentimes you just have a little bit of piece of the puzzle. You're
mm,
seeing the top of the glacier, and there's so much more to that glacier or that
mm,
scenario below. And when you wait 72 hours, you can kind of digress. And when you have those conversations, it takes the assumption away, and then right you can
mhm.
get on the same page. And it takes that's what I think what you're talking about
Yeah.
is the importance of just creating that culture of like let's just have discussions, let's talk about this as groups, as individuals. And when you can feel comfortable about, hey, I disagree with you, I want to challenge you on that, love it, let's talk about it. And that's what we need to strive for, is that culture to help with that communication that then helps with the culture. And people can feel like they can fail, that they can take risks, that they
Mm.
can have those difficult conversations and ultimately hopefully move forward.
Aligns so much of what I know in researching well-being of like just even thinking about the idea of resentment. How often are we just like stewing in our own psychological acid because we're assuming a person's intentions or we're replaying a scene rather than just try to clear it up? Or we're having arguments that haven't even happened yet. The amount of times where I go into something or I realize like I've just been arguing this fictional scenario for like at least 10 minutes in my head and it hasn't even happened or won't happen yet. And so there is that piece of even if it's difficult in the moment, we step in and we try to have that conversation. I mean, it goes back to the buffalo of like, even though those buffalo are coming back to help out and they know it's going to be a battle, like they could be destroyed by a lion or a crocodile. They're like, this is what we need to do as a community to gather together and to make sure that there's clarity, that there's progress and forward movement.
I was just gonna say real quick, it's really API, or assuming positive intent.
Mm,
Because how many times do we not assume positive intent? We
mhm,
have the discussion and we find out the underneath glacier, we find out the rest of the story, and we're like, oh, well, if I would have known. Well, why do we have to find out that story sometimes first? Why can't we give the benefit of the doubt? I think that happens. Like, I read something, I can't remember who I can give credit to, but 9 out of the 10 times when we have behavior problems, when we find out the story, we have
mm,
sympathy. Why can't
mm,
we just give these kids that are going through so many trials and tribulations and hardships the benefit of the doubt, and assume positive intent more, whether it's colleague to colleague or with our students or those types of things? Because when we do find out that story, 9 out of 10 times we're like, oh, well, yeah, I'm even glad they're here at school today, or I totally understand why they were having some behavior problems in Mrs. So and so's class. If we could just API a little bit
mm.
more, our days would go better.
100%. I think that kind of segues into the next conversation I want to have, and it's kind of around those tourists potentially. I write and talk a lot about and read a lot about cynicism, and cynicism being that broken trust or that distrust between a worker, individual, and their organization. And I think there are many reasons why cynicism emerges. And we know that it's a lot of times it's a defense mechanism of people have tried to care, they've tried to invest their emotional or physical energy, they've felt burned or let down. And so then they revert, they pull back, and then they are just observing and they're waiting for other people to make the change. Or sometimes they're just actively creating more distance with negativity and cynicism. And that seems to be a huge challenge to building culture, is that all the great ideas of the world can be in front of someone, but if they're feeling cynical or they're feeling withdrawn, it's kind of hard to get that buy-in. So do you have any hot tips or experiences around dealing with cynicism, either cynical moments or staff that you've known have had cynical moments? How do we battle back against that negativity?
No, that's a great question. So I think first you need to look at the individual that is cynical or resisting what's going on. And I always kind of sum it up with the 15-70-15 principle.
Mm,
I was a coach for many years, a teacher, right, and a principal, or and my theory is that you have about 15% of people that are just going to align with your philosophy, align with your theory,
mm,
and they're just going to be big supporters. Like
mm,
everything just matches up. Your personalities match up, and things are good. And those people just
mm,
don't screw it up with those
mm.
people. They're strong supporters. You have about 70% of people that can kind of go either way. And then you have about 15% that's the opposite of the top end, where like it doesn't matter what you do, you can't do right. It's just
Yeah,
not
yeah,
going to matter.
yeah.
And so what I mean by that is, okay, when you look at like staff or people that are resistant to ideas, I think first you have to say, is what is being said, is there some truth to it? Is it right?
Mm,
Take a step back and self-evaluation. No, we're not always perfect. And if what they're saying is right, then we'd have to positively react to that. Is
mm,
it reasonable?
hmm,
If it's reasonable, then we consider it, and if not, we throw it out. But we come back to that top 85%. If it's one of those 85% that are strong supporters or kind of the middle of the ground people, we need to again follow up with the questions of, help me understand why you're not in support of what we're doing, why you're
mm,
not liking this, or help me understand that what I'm not seeing here,
mm,
and really try and understand that thing.
mm,
Right. Going back to Covey, I already said to seek to understand
mm,
and then try and be understood. Like, really, what is the obstacle that's preventing you from liking this? And sometimes that's the question, like, what would it take for you to be in support of this initiative? What would
mm,
it take for you to support this? And see what it would take. And then that drives discussion. And I think that's more, again, with that 85%.
mm.
And then, and I don't know if this is politically correct or not, but the 15%, I just don't think you put a lot of
Yeah.
energy, and you still have those discussions. But it goes back to, and I think a lot of people have said this. I don't even know who to give credit to, because people give credit to this for everybody. I'm going to give it to Dabo Sweeney, head coach at Clemson. I love Dabo. He's a great person to follow on social media. But he said something along the lines of, don't take criticism from somebody you wouldn't take advice from. And so if the person is just being mean, rude, or criticizing for the sake of criticizing, like if they're in that 15%, like it just doesn't matter, right? Like, we're going to donate $1 million to this refugee camp and they're mad about it. Like, you're not going to change their opinion. And it doesn't do me any good, right? Gandhi, I will not let anyone walk through my mind with 30 feet. Don't give them that power
Mm,
to ruin your day. And
mhm,
I and I'm on a pause on that, because I don't think there's ever a whole day that should be ruined. I think there's hard times and
mhm,
hard days, but we should never let a difficult 5 moments turn into a bad day.
mm,
And if we have 15%, or they're in that range and they're just but I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is with staff members, a lot of the times it's because they see the top end of the glacier,
mhm,
and it's adding pieces of the puzzle to what we're trying to do, and to try and get on that same page of like, what don't help me help you understand what we're doing. Ask the right questions, have them ask the right questions, and then I think you can find at least some common ground to work towards whatever's going on, to eventually it's like, okay, it's a right fit for our vision and our culture, where we're
mm,
going. And a lot of times those 15% or whoever, they're going to find somewhere else that's a better fit for them.
mm,
It doesn't
mhm.
mean it's right and wrong, right? We're not absolutists in education. There's
Right.
too many gray areas,
Right.
right? Just because it's not great here doesn't mean it's not great for somebody else. It's
Yeah.
got to be like a marriage, a good fit. And so if your vision and theories of way things should be lines up with somewhere else better in another district, then great.
Mhm,
Then I want to encourage you to do that, so that we can all do better. But it ultimately goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is those discussions and finding out the why, and then breaking down those barriers or obstacles to either work and mesh together, or ultimately, right, like, hey, maybe this isn't a great fit of where this bus is going.
yeah, there's a lot within there that I would love to add on or unpack. I think a challenge of cynicism is that cynicism is often public and it can spread and it can be really hurtful. And I knows, like, in the realm of school leadership, it's got to be hard so often of you put in your heart and your energy into whatever it is, implementing a new initiative or try to address an issue, and then someone instantly meets it with negativity, and it's so easy to be like, oh, screw that person, like they're just a jerk. I don't want to hear it from them. But having that willingness to at least try to understand a little bit more. Within that, though, I think sometimes school leaders fall in the trap of overemphasizing or focusing on that 15% who isn't going to buy in. And so then sometimes they limit themselves of they want to try something new and they want to try to push, but then they start thinking of like, well, so-and-so is just going to complain anyway, and I don't feel like dealing with it because I have enough on my plate right now, versus really shifting that idea of how do I focus on that 85%? How do I build up their connection and their culture and their belief and their trust so that the large majority of my staff is moving forward? And then it becomes that moment of those who aren't, you either jump on board or like, I can help you find another boat if you need to. I want you to be happy and moving and sailing along. But how often do we seek the understanding to the point where we're still empowering those who really want to stay on the ship and move forward?
As you're talking, the thought that comes into my mind is first, there Phil Jackson, right? Probably one of the greatest coaches of all time in any sport, let alone basketball. And he said, one thing I've learned is you can't force your will on people. If you want them to act differently, you have to have them inspire themselves. And it really comes back to putting your energy into those 85%. But you could even maybe get to like 90%, right? You don't want to just go, it's only 85%. That's my ceiling. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. Is you want to get more, right? And one of the ways that I think you can do that is understanding the principle of showing and modeling versus telling. Right? This is another quote, and you can probably tell I'm a big quote guy. It's probably from my coaching background. All my players used to give me all quotes and stuff, and I just love that. But so whoever said this, I'll give you credit. But it basically says, if you tell me what to do, I forget. If you teach me what to do, I remember sometimes. And if you involve me, then I learn. And that's what we do with our staffs, with each other, is we want to really model and show. And that's one of my goals, right? When we have staff get-togethers, I don't call them staff meetings because as soon as you say meeting, everybody's like, "Oh, here's boring. Why are we having a staff meeting?" No, we get to get together and we get to collaborate and talk and help each other out. And I want to always be modeling what I expect or want our staff to do, what I want our teachers to do in the classroom, rather than just telling them, because it's so more powerful if we can show and model what to do rather than just tell. Because just like that quote says, they're going to forget. Sometimes remember, but you involve them, you get them involved and empower them, then all of a sudden they're going to learn, and it's going to drive that culture.
For sure. I think the moments when I've seen a cynical staff member, because I've seen and worked with a few in my time, and I've seen some of the most powerful moments where that has shifted is when those individuals were asked, invited, and empowered to take something they were really passionate about and invest their time and energy into it. And I think that kind of goes back to that idea of like, rather than trying to force them to do what I want them to do, why don't I figure out what is really driving their motivation, their intrinsic drive to do this work called education, and how do I support them in doing so and getting those opportunities? And those are the moments where you see someone like, now they feel a sense of trust, they feel a sense of welcoming and belonging. And because they have something they care about and a leader who has empowered them to do that, far more likely to want to still move along forward with the rest of the group or the organization. And so that's a big piece. And I also love how you said, like, don't make it a finite 85%, because I'm sure some of our logical thinkers are like, well, there's my 85%. Screw that person. You didn't make that.
And that's going to ebb and flow, and it's going to vary from things to things. So yeah, I want to unpack what you just said a second ago, and maybe just throw out an idea of a strategy that we used here at Shelley that was pretty successful a couple of years ago, and it's PD. And I think a lot of times you bring up PD and a lot of staff are like, oh, here we go again. What's the newest idea? This will pass too, all that idea. And a lot of people have heard like Genius Hour or this idea. A couple of years ago, we shifted that to teachers. And for the entire year, we just followed George Kiros's idea of the smartest person in the room is the room. And so we want to learn from each other. And one of the things we did with our PD is at the beginning of the year, we just said what you just said. What are you passionate about? What drives you? What do you
Mm.
love? What can make us better? And then we broke up our PD days that whole year, and staff would sign up,
Mm.
and we would just say on these 5 days throughout the year, you're going to sign up. And anywhere, it could be 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be that lengthy, up to maybe 15 minutes so we can get everybody in. But you're the expert. It's an idea of Genius Hour, and you're
Mm.
going to just teach us,
Mm.
help us get better today. And it allowed that autonomy, that control of professional development. What do you guys want to learn about? We had some amazing things from, I mean, it was just an awesome year of PD. So
Mm.
yeah, but as you were talking about learning from each other, and
Mhm.
I just had that come to my mind of maybe an idea that if it could fit, we had a lot of success with it.
Yeah, I love that. I've seen so many schools and organizations shift to that model of, rather than bringing someone from the outside who, I'm obviously, my work is coming into districts and trying to help support. So I'm not
Yeah.
entirely against like bringing in other experts and other people to share some ideas, but so often we forget that the greatest source of culture building and content knowledge and conceptual understanding is already living and breathing in our organization. And a lot of times what we have to do is just take off the shackles or the barriers, or provide the time and the support so that people can share what they do. And that's such a powerful way to increase autonomy and tap into what people love, and to be a welcoming place where people know that they have something to contribute. So I'm 100% on board with those ideas as well. So as we start to shift into the end of this conversation, before we get into our final section, you have given us many an example of just concepts, principles, books to check out, thought leaders. But if you had one or two final recommendations of what can school leaders or staff members do to build the culture that they want, or to build a positive culture, what are a couple other things that you really want people to do or take home with them?
I love that question, and it's one I've been thinking about going into this as
Mm.
the topic. And I was drawing to Steve Constantino, another great follower, and he talked about this. And I experienced the same thing last November. My family went on a trip, and we're flying, and I paid attention to this after I heard it. And one of the things that they got done after you learn how to put your seatbelt on, and if you're in the ocean, where to go, and all that
Mm.
stuff. But they came and they said something that I don't think they had to, and they said, "Thanks for flying with us."
Mm.
And it was an interesting concept because it was like it is a choice.
Mm.
And when we talk about trying to build good culture and positive culture, we need to ask ourselves that question. If our students really had a choice, would they choose us? Hopefully the answer is yes. Hopefully it is yes, right? And I'm not getting on
Yeah.
to vouchers and all those things. I'm not going down that rabbit hole. But it's a question that I think we really need to ask ourselves is if they had a choice, would they choose to come to my class? Would they choose to be in my basketball, football program, my
Mm.
wrestling program, my dance program, my school? Would they choose and want to be here? And
Mm.
everything we do should help drive that. If they had an option to choose, they would choose Shelley High School. They would choose us. Hopefully,
Mm.
that's what we would say, right?
Mm.
So that's number one. Number two, I would say you have to create a culture where people can have fun and laugh. I think that's one of your
Mm.
biggest indicators. I would hope that if you walk through Shelley High School or a dentist office or a bank or whatever it is, and if you were in there very long, that you would hear some laughter.
Mm.
And I go back to Stevie Valvano, 1993, in my opinion, one of the greatest speeches of all time. If you've never heard it, it's worth YouTubing. He's been diagnosed terminal disease. He's got full of cancer, and he knows his time is short. He's at the ESPY Awards, and he's just speaking from the heart.
Mm.
And he says, "Here's my advice," and it's applicable here too. He says, "Every single day, number one, you need to laugh.
Mm.
Number two, you need to think or learn. Get out of your comfort zones, right? You need to learn a little bit, be a lifelong learner. And then number three, you need to have your emotions stirred. If you can do all three of those, that
Mm.
is a great day."
Mm.
Number one, he said, laugh. And so I would just encourage all schools and organizations out there to make sure that you're finding some humor in the day, right? It's the shock absorber of stress and life sometimes,
Yeah.
to make sure that you're laughing. Real quick, 1964, Norman Cousins is an editor for a newspaper. He's got a spinal injury and it's filling up with infection, and it's just not good. And he does an interesting thing. Checks himself out of the hospital. He does some own research. And I'm not advising this by any means. Don't come back and say, check yourself out. But disclaimer. But he loads up on some vitamin C and he goes into a hotel room
Hmm.
and he finds all of the funniest videos and movies that he can watch. And when the pain would start to come back, he would watch a funny video
Hmm.
and he would try and laugh and create these experiences. And in this specific case, a few weeks later, Norman Cousins is miraculously healed.
Hmm.
Right? It's just amazing the serotonin levels and the good chemicals that can come from a good laugh. So I would say number 2 is laughter. I love that I get to come to work and I don't even feel like it's work. It's I feel guilty that I get a paycheck because I love what I do. And part of that is the people that I'm around. Like Shelley High School staff is second to none. My administrative partner, Courtney Markham, and our office ladies, we call it ladies plus one because I'm the only male. Like they make coming so fun and enjoyable. And our teachers are knocking it out of the park. But find that environment that also feels like that for you. Like, man, I feel guilty that I'm getting a paycheck. It doesn't feel like I've had jobs where it's felt like work. And I'm like, man, when do I get a check out? And it doesn't. And if you can create that environment where people really want to be there, you're going to have, and part of that is done really by, if you think about it, if you can make each person you come in contact with, if you can make them feel important, valued, and appreciated, you give them a very powerful gift. And if you can have that goal of every day, going to drop another name, Joe Sanfilippo is another amazing, he's a superintendent in Wisconsin. I think he actually just took another job, but follow that dude. He is a dose of vitamin C, man. He's amazing. He's awesome. And I love that guy, but he says every interaction matters because it could be the interaction that they remember for the rest of their lives. And if we can have that mantra, and I've seen both ends, right? Where somebody has a bad interaction and they're like, screw that guy. I don't like that guy. And it's one interaction. And you're like, give him a chance. Nope. He had his chance or she had his chance and it's done for me. I've seen students, I've seen staff members. I hope I've never been a part of that, but you have that. The opposite is also true. Man, we talk about these kids that will run through walls for coaches and teachers and people. It's because they did that very thing. They make sure every interaction matters, every day matters, every class period matters because it's an opportunity to impact a life. And when we take that not lightly, we can remember our why, right? Because Jimmy Cassis, when we lose our why, we often lose our way. And that seems to be happening all over the nation right now with teachers. And when we know our why, we can endure anyhow. As hard and difficult and as challenging it is in education today, it's also amazing and uplifting and awesome. We get to impact lives every single day. And the successes and failures that we have, those are temporary. But as an educator, you have a chance to leave a legacy that lasts for eternity. You think about the teachers that you had and the coaches and all these people that influenced your life that may be gone, like their legacy lives on forever. And as an educator, you have that opportunity to change lives every day and never take that for granted. So important that you never lose and underestimate the importance of what you do every day as an educator.
I mean, I think these are going to be the most robust show notes I've ever put together because the amount of just resources and examples and principles in human beings that you have packed into this tight space is a testament to how deeply you care about not only your own development as a human being, but resonating that out to the world around you. So I'm super geeked about sharing your brain and your brilliance with the rest of the world. But before we leave off, because we have one final section here, we're going to shift into our section of statements, which you may be familiar with. I'm going to give you 3 statements. Your options are to strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree, and we'll probably unpack them a little bit. We kick things off with something that is not entirely related to schools, but more and more it has been. So lots of conversation right now as of the recording of this around the idea of TikTok and social media, and to what extent should there be limits placed, and there are laws in development of how that is limited towards young adults into adolescents. And so your statement is social media is bad for mental health.
Ooh, agree. And I probably would say not strongly agree because there's some pros to it a little bit. And I'm going to speak from a principal standpoint. I'm putting my
Mm,
principal
mm,
hat right now, and you see depression rates are at all time highs.
mhm,
Suicide ideation, self harm, all of these negative emotions that kids are dealing with, and one of the common denominators is social media, right?
mhm.
Of how am I really validated in life is not about how many likes I can get. It's amazing how many kids will post something and they'll check it and then like 5 minutes they'll delete it if they don't have enough likes or those types of things. So of like that's not who you are,
Yeah.
right? I may be a principal and that's my title, but that's not who I am. And I've got to make sure, and that's where I worry about social media is it's kind of fogging up the mirrors of who people are and what is their identity, right? All these things that we
Mhm.
do is only a makeup of who I am. It's what I do, so to speak, not who I am. And so that's what worries me a little bit about social media. But again, it's what you do with it and how
Yeah.
you learn with it and how we can teach to use it in a healthy and productive way. And so just depending on how we do that, it leads to that statement.
Yeah, and I can see the challenge of responding to that because I mean you gave examples of a lot of great thinkers and great minds that we source from on social media a lot of times. We get access to some of their thoughts and some of their content, and so as grown adults in particular, it can be really really helpful. But I can absolutely see, especially for young and developing minds, when those brains are still in development and their identities are still in massive chaotic formation, mixing in the chaos of social media or the addictive tendencies of social media can create some of that bad mix. And I'm with you in terms of the impact I've seen on mental health of students I've worked with. It seems to at least be a part of that conversation, if not driving that conversation a lot. So yeah, I'm sure a lot of people can relate. Your next statement, getting back into the realm of culture building: team building
Mhm.
exercises are a waste of time.
Strongly disagree.
All right, tell it.
Now, I think you're gonna receive some resistors and opposition to that, right? Could you see that? "Oh, we're doing the trust fall," and I'm
Mhm.
not saying that, right, or whatever, but it's this idea, like let me ask you this question, I'm gonna kinda reverse it.
Mm.
What would you say is the number one predictor of success for a student at Harvard?
Mm. That's a huge question. I would
Yeah, a
predict
little loaded.
I would predict their feeling of community or social support.
Yeah, you're right on track. And so, according to Sean Acor, right,
Mm, mhm,
Happiness Advantage, latest book, Big Potential, which is another one I recommend. Like, if you haven't read that, that's a must read. It goes back to
mm,
like 7 Habits for Highly Effective People and Dale Carnegie's How to Make Friends and Influence People. Carol Dweck's right growth mindset. Like, put it
mm,
up there. It is a must read for everybody. But real quick, Big Potential. He does this study on Harvard students. He says the number one predictor of success is their ecosystem
mm, mhm,
and who they build their networking with. Those that try and go alone are more likely to drop out, have higher levels of stress. Those
mhm,
that team up, network. And so going back to team building, right? It's more of are we networking? Are we surrounding ourselves with the water buffalo?
mhm,
And it's easy, right? What we're talking about is not when you're swimming with the stream, not when you're running downhill.
mm,
Simon Sinek's inner circle of people are that they're there with you all the time, despite your flaws and your weaknesses. They love you because of who you are. And that's what the potential of team working has.
mm,
So if you can look at it from that standpoint of we're just building relationships.
mhm.
That's what it's all about. Is we're building relationships through it. Then absolutely, yes, strongly agree.
Mm. And I think that's the important piece. If I've seen team building exercises that just feel like a time filler or just like a fun little activity. And I mean, it's similar to good teaching practices of if you're just like throwing stuff in there randomly and it doesn't connect with the rest of the flow of the content or concept, like it's going to seem a little disjointed. And most of the time when I've heard people complain about team building, it's like, well, what does this have to do with my actual job or my task or this community of people? Or it's just like, hey, we're going to do a fun thing because I couldn't think of anything else. And I
Yeah.
Googled quickly what's a team building exercise. That's when it
Yeah.
seems to be a little disjointed.
Yeah. What's the why behind it, right? If
Yeah.
they understand that, yeah. If it's thrown together, like, oh, here we go again.
Love it. Human knot. Here we go. Enough human knots.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
Make sure your introverts are aware of that one ahead of time so they can take the day off.
All right. Your last statement: one individual can't change a school's culture.
Oh, that's the end of it.
Mm,
Um, I disagree. I disagree, right? The sphere of influence that one person has
mm,
is, and I think you talk about this
Mm-hmm.
in your book, right? Get a plug of the burnout cure
Mm-hmm.
is at least threefold,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there's some studies done by Sean Acor again, as well as yourself, that talk about like what I bring today is felt by at least threefold.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can bring it today and I can bring whatever I have and give everything I have and bring the energy and the passion and the good attitude, that's infectious. That's contagious. And so's the opposite.
Mm.
And it just takes one person to start that ball rolling. So absolutely, don't think that, well, I'm only just one starfish, right? Made a difference to that one. One person can make a difference. Jocko Willink talks about that in Extreme Ownership, which is another must-read book, right? Leadership is so important. And focusing on your strengths. Gallup did a poll a little while ago that said if we focus on our strengths,
Mm-hmm.
right? If I come in and have that attitude and know that I can be a dose of vitamin C and lift others and elevate others, that it's going to be infectious. We're going to focus on our strengths. And by doing so, we're going to be able to increase the productivity of our work week twice fold.
Mm.
Be engaged 3 times as much and have 6 times as much life satisfaction just by focusing on our strengths and knowing that I can make a difference.
That is a beautiful one to end on, is acknowledging and owning that whether you're in a school leadership position or not, or no matter what your role or place within an organization or a school, that all of us are infectious and we are contagious. And if we come into our day leveraging the type of contagion we want to create or send, that's a start with the process of shifting culture. I can't thank you enough for carving out some time in the middle of your school day, your work day, to hop on Educator Happy Hour. I feel like we might need to start a section of Burke's library where you just like give us a few just like a Rolodex of like, what are some things I could be reading right now? And I'm going to be linking to a lot of that in the show notes. But thanks again so much for your time, your energy, and who you are as a person. All right, Happy Hour Hodgepodge. How many books do you now have on hold at the library after that one? Burke is a walking Rolodex of leadership principles, research, and strategies, and he gave us more than a few great ideas and insights for impacting a school's culture. But I wanted to dive deeper into a couple recommendations for homework assignments this week. First, practice the 24-48 hour rule this week. Make sure you acknowledge or express gratitude to one person at least every 24 hours. And when you're presented with challenging behavior by someone this week, take at least 48 hours to seek understanding before landing on any sort of judgment or criticism. Whether it's a student, a parent, a staff member, use the 2-day window to ask questions, think more deeply, and ultimately consider that what is on the surface of a person's behavior stems from what's below the surface. Their emotions, past experiences, and needs that we all can relate to. Seek that understanding so we can move together rather than apart. My second recommendation this week is to focus on being a better heart of culture building. Burke and I discussed how great leaders seek clarity on not only how they send information, but how they receive feedback, like a heart sending and receiving that blood. We can really shape our culture by habituating authentic invitations for feedback. A lot of times feedback fails because it isn't happening regularly enough, it isn't authentic enough, or we don't act upon it as teachers or leaders. So here's a game changer that forever influenced my work as an educator. Every Friday, I would do Feedback Friday with my students. I would give them a quick index card and I would ask them a simple question. What is one thing I can do next week to teach you better? Now, those weekly index cards help me be a better teacher than any classroom observation or evaluation or coursework ever did, because that feedback was timely. And not only that, it shifted the culture of our room. We created a space where students knew that I was going to hear them, respect their feedback, try to implement it to the best of my ability, but ultimately I cared about working together so we all can grow. So give it a go. Make Feedback Friday your thing. Frequently ask for authentic feedback, listen it, hear it, implement it to the best of your ability, and watch the culture around you shift. And more than anything else, keep diving deeper to understand the humans you work with. Culture isn't just what we see from people's behaviors, it's their motivations, values, and needs. And we have those in common way more than we often see. Keep those ships sailing forward by seeking deeper understanding. And with that, I see an iced coffee, an icy Diet Coke, or an iced margarita straight ahead for you all this week. Thank you for listening, Happy Hour Hodgepodge. I'll invite you on my raft next week on another Educator Happy Hour.